Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to bring you my latest course on advanced React with TypeScript. So this is going to be a continuation of the React Rock, Paper, Scissors project that I've built before, but this time I'm going to add in some TypeScript and testing. So this is going to be really ideal for anyone that knows a bit of TypeScript and a bit of testing, and you just want to know how everything fits together. And this is exactly what I'm going to do in this course. Just a quick disclaimer before we actually start in. This is a free preview of over 3 hours of the full course, which will be available on telmoacademy.com. But these 3 hours will still give you a lot of value, so make sure that you go through it and enjoy it. So let's get started with it. Alright guys, let's get started with this course. So this is going to be a continuation of these other React Rock, Paper, Scissors that I created before, where we are building this game just with simple React. But now we are going to start adding TypeScript and testing and the context API. So this is going to be an advanced course. To create now, first of all, this UI, I'm actually just going to be copying some of the code that I've used in this previous project. It's completely free on my platform, so you can always go there and just watch that. So I'm not going to repeat the same steps. I'm going to just reuse the same UI, like the same divs, the same styling. So I'm going to start, first of all, by adding this. I'm going to just like restructure this a bit more, like creating different components, for example, for this section, for the title, another component for this part in here, and another component for this part where we are playing. And obviously, once this is done, we can start implementing some TypeScript, some testing, make sure that everything is working fine. So let's get started with this. I'm going to be using Vite to create this project. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in here npm and I'm going to do create vite at latest, okay? And make sure that you are on the path where you want to install this project. This is not vote, but this is vite, all right? So let's press enter. And once you press enter, it's going to ask you to choose a project name. So I'm going to call this one React TypeScript RPS, which is like rock, paper, scissors. I'm going to press enter. I'm going to be choosing React. That's the project we're going to use. And we are going to use TypeScript. So everything comes already installed for you. You don't have to do anything. So I'm going to just go inside of that. Okay. And I'm going to open it. All right, so I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to increase this. I can get rid of this one now and just put it in here. I think that's perfect. Okay, so now that we got this, let me just open the terminal. The first thing I want to do is just do npm install. So when you create a new React project with Vite, you need to install all the modules by yourself. So that's exactly what we are doing because we got the package.json with all our dependencies. We just need to install them, and it's super fast, much faster than the Create React app. Now that we got this, I want to install this package. So npm install React icons. All right. So now that I install this package, this is the package I'm going to use these kind of icons, you know, for the hand, for the scissors, and so on. Perfect. So I'm going to go inside of my source. I'm going to go inside of my app.tsx. And now this is going to be like the main component that we're going to be using. So I'm going to just delete all this stuff in here and this that I don't need and this stuff on the top. All right. And also, now that we got this in here, first of all, I'm going to copy the structure of the project that I have in here. So I'm going to copy what I have in here on the side. As I mentioned, guys, I've done these like in very detail in another project, in the previous project actually. So I'm not going to be typing everything. So there it is. I'm going to have a div in here. Let me just put this side by side so we can see like what we are doing. I'm going to create a main container. Then inside of it, I'm going to have a div, which is going to hold this part. You see React, rock, paper, scissors. That's going to be this section. We got the subtitle, React Typescript game. And then we have two components, which is going to be the score and results, and choose and play. Score and results is going to be this section here in the middle, which will have, for example, your score, whatever you chose to play, and the computer the same. And then this one, choose and play, is going to be this component down here. So this is how I'm going to structure the project. And you know, that's it. So I'm just going to comment this one out because obviously at the moment this is going to give you some errors. Look, you even have these kind of red lines because these components don't exist at the moment in this project. We're going to create them. So I'm going to just comment them out for now. And we also have some red lines in here because I'm going to be using CSS modules. So we can write CSS for each one of the components that you want without affecting other parts of your project. So let's create in here on the top app.module.css. So now that I have this one, what I want to install or to create is a container. So let me just do that. So I'm just going to copy this. So this is going to be the CSS for the container. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save this one in here. Let's import this. Import styles from, and this is going to be app.module.css. All right. Our project is not running at the moment. Let's fix that. If you don't know how to start a project, look inside of your package.json. There is a script in here and it tells you that if you want to start in dev mode, just run npm run dev. Okay. npm run dev. Okay, so gives you in here the URL for your project. Just control click is going to open for you. There it is, rock, paper, scissors. Obviously we don't have everything yet, but we are going to fix it. One thing that I want to add is, let me just go in here on the body. Okay, we have this index.css. Basically this is like a CSS for the whole project. It's not tied to any component in particular. I'm going to go in here, replace this with this part, which just gives us like some background color and so on. We're going to start adding some more things, so don't worry about that. We need this one as well, title container. So title container, let me just see. I'm going to add this one. Let's copy this. Let's go in here. Okay, there it is, much better. So, okay, we are also going to center this in a second, so don't worry about that. Now, I'm going to stop this video so it doesn't get too long. The next part, what I'm going to do is just focusing on these new component, the score and results. And then after we keep going on the next one and so on. All right, so I'll see you in a bit. All right, so let's carry on and now let's build this next part, which is the score and results. So I'm just going to uncomment this part like this. And of course, let me just comment this one again because this is still not ready. So this score and results doesn't exist. So let's go in here on the top. I like to import my components first. So I'm going to do import and I'm going to do score and results from, and we don't have this kind of folder structure yet, but we are going to do it now. So I'm going to say that this is going to be inside of a folder called components, and then inside I want to grab the score and results. Okay, this is where it's going to come from. Let me just increase this a bit so we can see this better. So score and results from score and results. So this is fine. This is going to crash obviously because we don't have it. Let's go inside of our source. I'm going to do a new folder. I'm going to call it components, and inside I'm going to create score and results.tsx because we're going to use now TypeScript, so we need to add in here the extension tsx. I'm going to do rafce. So
this basically is just like a shortcut that I use to create some sort of new components without having to write everything down by myself. So you guys go in here into your extensions, and it's called, I think it's like ES7, something like this. Let me just look, ES7. I think that's the one. There you go. This is the one. ES7, React, Redux, and so on. So you can basically just use this kind of extension if you want to. All right, so let's go back in here. And now that we got this, let's save it. Our page should not crash anymore. There it is. Look, score and results. This is what's coming from there. Let's fix this part in here because it's not centered on the page. So if you notice, when you create like a new React project, let me go inside of this main.tsx. So basically what React does is grabs all your project, all your code that you have, in this case our app component, looks for an ID of root. This is going to be like your public, it's not in here even, index.html. So this is going to be a div with an ID of root, and inside you're going to put everything. If you just inspect in here the page and you look inside of your body, you got an ID of root. So this is what I want to, I'm just going to close it for now. I want to select. So inside of my index.css, I'm just going to put it in here. So the element with an ID of root, I'm going to pass the CSS. And what this does is just make sure that everything is nicely centered on the page. That's it. That's what we want. And now let's go and let me just increase this a bit in here. Let's go and just add everything that we need from this section, which is going to be, let me just close this one. It's just going to be this section, right? Let's do that. Let's go inside of, let me just start closing some of this stuff that we are not using. This one. So I'm going to be copying some of this stuff, like I said, because I've done this already in the previous project. Let me go in here, score and results. Okay, just one div, which is going to have all the scores. So this section in here that you can see is going to be this one in here on the top, just with a score for the player and so on, score player, score computer. Then we're going to have this div in here. All right, let me save this. Yeah, much better. This auto format is much better. Okay, so then we have this section here where we're going to have this div is going to be a container for the results. We have this first div, which is going to be for this one, where we will have the hand that you want to play. We're going to have this mid column where we're going to have our timer. We're going to have the message of the results. And then we're going to have this one, styles computer hand, which is going to be this one. And I think that's it. Let's just add some styles. As you can see, there is already some styles. I'm going to go in here, new file. I'm going to call this score and results.module.css, because this is going to be our modules, right? So let's do exactly that. I'm going to import styles from /, and I'm going to call this from score and results.module.css. Let's look for this score container. So let's go in here. I'm going to paste it in here. So let's look in here. Okay, we got some score, and this is going to be the H3 that we got. Let me just see. That's the one. Okay. What else? So we got this score container. Let's look for this one as well. The score. There it is. Look, you just add this CSS in here and it's going to style everything that you got. We missed the results. Okay. So let's go and look for the results as well. So I'm going to copy these, go in here. Okay. Pass in the results. You don't see nothing at the moment because there's nothing in there. Let's go into the player hand. Okay, so player hand and the computer hand. is both of them, if I'm not wrong. Let me see. Player hand and computer hand, both of them, they will have the same. Okay, there it is. This is exactly what we want. And finally, let me see, mid call. Let's add the mid call. This is going to be some style for whatever we're going to put in here in the middle. At the moment, we don't have nothing, but then we will see it, of course. All right, so that's it for this part. Now, the next part we're going to do is going to be this one, choose and play. We're going to create a new component for that section. All right, so I'll see you in a bit. All right, so let's carry on. So this next section that we have in here is going to be the choose and play. So I'm actually going to create, instead of components like what we have in here, I'm going to call these ones like sections. So I'm going to create a new folder, call this one like sections. Okay, and our sections that we have in here, for example, the one that we had, the score and results, and now the choose and play, instead of having them as components, I'm going to move them into this folder called sections, and then actual components that I want to reuse, I'm going to put them inside of the folders. So let me just grab these two. I don't know if I can just like double click and just drag them in here. Okay, so I moved both of these files from the components into the sections. So you need to make sure that in your app.tsx, now you are not importing these from components, but from sections. Okay, and everything is still working fine. So make sure that you update these in here on the top and make sure that you move from components. Look, there is nothing inside there, and I move them into the sections. So let's create a new section. So I'm going to do a new section, call it choose and play.tsx. Let's create a new file, RAFCE, choose and play. That's completely fine. So what I want to create, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to start with this. So this is like a React fragment. If you guys never seen this, just make sure that we have a parent around like multiple children. So I'm going to have this section, this div, which is going to be the styles choice button container, which is going to be this part. Okay. And then we're going to have under just the button that we want. So I'm going to copy this button. I'm going to put it down here. And this is going to have a class name. We don't have an on click at the moment. We just have a button to play. Let me see. Yeah, we still don't see nothing because we need to import it, right? So let's do import choose and play. So choose and play from sections, choose and play. And now let's uncomment this and we should be able, obviously we don't see anything because this is red, look, saying that can't find any of these styles. So let's import styles from, and this is going to be /score results .module.css, which doesn't exist. So let's create it. So oh, this is not score and results. This is, we're going to create a file anyway. So choose and play .module.css. Okay, so what's the things that we need? We need this choice button. Okay, so let me just grab that. I'm gonna copy this, put it in here. Remember guys, we've done this before in the previous project. So now play button. Let me just see if I can find it. And there it is. Okay, let me go in here, paste this, and this is going to be the styles choose and play.module.css. I'm importing this here, score, and yeah, this is choose and play. All right, there it is. Okay, so in here in this div, choices button container, at the moment, look, we don't have nothing. We don't have these kind of different options that we can click and select and whatever. This is actually a good opportunity for us to create like a different component because we're going to pass inside of these components like the name, the icon, and so on. So I'm gonna call these ones, let's go in here, I'm gonna call here like hand selection. So this is going to be the name of this component that I'm going to create. Okay, and I'm going to paste this like 3 times in here. That's what I want. I want to pass inside right now like a name. So I'm going to pass in here a name. So the name is going to be like, I don't need to pass these curly braces. I'm just going to pass it like this. So the name in here is going to be rock. Okay, this is going to be the property. And this one is going to be paper. And this is going to be scissors. So name equals to, oops, scissors. Just delete this. So now that we got this, let's just create this component in here. Now we can actually create a component. Let's do new hand selection dot tsx. Let's create this RFCE. Let's go in here, and right now the only thing that I want to return, let me just see, is going to be like, let me just go in here, create a fragment. I want to return like a button. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to paste this. So this is going to be my button. Let me just delete this stuff because I don't need it at the moment. I'm going to keep this one because I'm going to keep the CSS that we have in here. So this is going to be the button. And then inside of the button, what I want to have is going to be the name. I'm going to add actually the icon as well in a second. So let's see. We got an error in here from the styles. So let's import this. So import, let's create this hand selection dot module dot css. Okay, and this is the choice button, if you remember, choice button. So I'm gonna do exactly that. I'm gonna copy this, I'm gonna go in here, and I'm gonna paste this. This is the choice button. And let's import styles from dot slash, and this is gonna be hand selection dot module dot css. Okay, let's look in here because this is how our project is going to look like. It's complaining at the moment because it says that, look, you are passing in here a variable of name that doesn't exist anywhere. So if you guys remember from before, from this choose and play, we passed, okay, we need to pass this component. Let's actually import it in here on the top. Import. So hand selections. I want to call this hand selection, not selections, plural. So let me just delete it. Make sure that you guys are following along. I put in here an extra S by mistake, so I'm just going to delete this. So I want to keep this consistent. So hand selection. Okay, this is my hand selection component. And now on my choose and play, I want to import hand selection from components, hand selection. Okay, I'm just going to go up one level out of the sections, inside of the components, and grab that component itself. And look, we imported this component and we pass inside of property of name, and it gives us like some sort of an error in here. Is saying that, look, this component, it should not receive any property. You didn't specify anything inside of that component. So that's exactly what we are going to do now. So when you create a component in here with React, you can always pass some sort of properties in here that will tell, you know, the component what kind of properties you are going to use in here. So after the name of the component, I'm going to pass in here something like React dot FC. So because this is like a functional component, And what I'm going to pass inside of this is going to be like the shape of our props, basically. What kind of props are we going to use in here? So I could call this anything that I want. I'm going to call it props, obviously, because they represent the props. So I'm going to start in here and create an interface. And basically an interface will allow me to tell, okay, what kind of data type we're going to have in here for these props. So interface props, same name as we got in here. So at the moment, I'm only going to receive a property called name, and it's going to be of the type string. That's it. So now that we said that this component in here can receive this kind of props, we can go and pass those props in here. Instead of just passing them like this, I'm just going to destructure them straight away. So I'm going to put in here name. All right. And look, everything is working. If you hover it, look, we're going to receive a name of the type string. And there it is. Look in our page, rock, paper, scissors. Which is perfect, And if we go back to our choose and play, look, no errors in here. Let's do just one more thing in here. Instead of just passing in here just the name that we have, let's pass maybe the icon as well. So in order for us to pass the icon, what we can do is we need to import those icons. So I'm going to do import. And if you guys remember from the other project that I create, I'm just going to import these like this. So from the actual documentation of the React icons, you can just do import, the name of the icon that you want to use, and then from React icons FA. So that's it. Now, if you want to use this, you can simply just go in here and, for example, create icon. So this is going to be another property that I'm going to add. Icon equals to, and now I can pass in here some curly braces because I'm going to use some JavaScript. I want to pass in here, so this is the rock, so I'm going to use this rock component. Okay, like this. And these icons, they allow you to pass some other properties, like for example the size. This is to make them bigger or smaller. The size of this is going to be like 60. This is going to be like this, 60. And I think it's fine. So I'm going to just copy this one, what I have here. So this is going to be the icon. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to make sure that you leave this part for the actual component. Look, you create a component and you close it. Yeah. So I'm going to pass it in here. Look, this is my icon with this property, and then you close the actual component. So we pass the rock, we need to pass the paper, so don't put them all the same, paper, and then we got the scissors. Now, we have something in here complaining, saying icon with some red lines, because our hand selection, if you remember, we are not telling it that it's going to receive any sort of icon, so we need to tell it, okay, are we going to receive any icon property? We can do that. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to say icon. We're going to receive a prop called icon, and the type of it is going to be of JSX.element. That's it, because it's going to be like some JSX element, like some HTML, basically. That's how React handles these kind of elements. And now in here, instead of just having the name, we're going to pass the icon. So we can use it inside of our code. I'm going to go in here and I'm pass icon. And look at that. Now you have the rock, paper, and scissors. And I think that's everything that we need in here for this section. So we got everything ready. Now that's when the serious stuff is going to start. You know, we're going to start implementing the context. We're going to start implementing some more TypeScript, some testing. So that's it for this part now. And now we'll see you in a bit. Alright guys, let's carry on with this. So the next part would be for us to start adding some sort of a state management, because as you remember, we got all these different sections in different components, so they can't actually communicate with each other. So we're going to use the context API for this project since it's a small one. Otherwise we would use something like Redux, for example. So let's start creating this. I'm going to create inside of my source folder here. I'm going to create a folder called context. And inside, that's where we're going to start adding all these files that we need. So I'm going to call this one options context. So options context dot tsx. Okay. And let's start adding some stuff in here that we need. So I'm going to start first of all by creating the context itself. So I'm going to do const options context. I'm actually going to put this as a capital letter in here. So this is going to be equals to create context. As you can see, this actually imported automatically for me. So we imported create context from React. And we're going to open parentheses, and we're going to say like when we create our context, what we're going to be like the initial values that we can have. So because we're going to have a couple of them, I'm going to put this in here as an object. And first of all, I'm going to put in here options. And these options in here is going to be an array, because what I want to have for these options will be, for example, if we can select paper, rock, paper, or scissors, and each one of these options that we can have, you know, we're going to have the icon, the name, and maybe the ID of it, so we can select it, and that should be it. Now, obviously, because we are using TypeScript in this project, would be good for us to add some sort of types for this. So TypeScript can actually help us with this. So I'm going to add in here in between these angle brackets the name of the type that I want to pass in here. So I'm going to call this options context, maybe. All right. You could add all these different types that you want for these just here on the top, but it's always better to keep things organized. So I'm going to create a different file that we will add all the types for our context in here. So I'm going to do a new file. I'm going to call this one options context types.ts. I think that's fine. Okay, so you usually want to add like TS, just like the extension TS, when you just have regular JavaScript. If you have some sort of like JSX, like HTML and so on, you want to add this kind of extension, the TSX. For the types, we just have regular JavaScript, so we don't need any TSX in there. So let's add this one in here. I'm going to call this one export. I'm going to create an interface in here. Interface for options context. Okay, you could create a type or you could create an interface, but interfaces, they have advantage that you could extend other interfaces if you want. So that's the reason why I usually use them. I'm gonna put in here my options. Okay, and these options in here is gonna be an array, obviously. So each one, let's say, what do we want this array to have? So I'm going to create another one in here on the top. So I'm going to do export. The reason I'm doing export is because we're going to need to import this in the other file, right? So I'm going to do export, and I'm going to call this one options. I think export interface options. So that's exactly what I want. And what I want from here is that each one of the options that we can have, you know, for rock, paper, scissors, and so on, I want to add a name. So we need to have the name, and I want to add an icon. Okay. So for the name itself, we have just three options. We have rock, paper, or scissors. So I could actually create an enum for that, because TypeScript allows us to create enums. So I'm going to do export enum hand option. And I want that the only options that we would have would be rock. So I'm creating the variable that I want, which is be rock. Oh, sorry, this is not equals, not colon, but equals. And then we're going to have paper. And then we're going to have, so this is paper. And then finally, we're going to have the scissors. Okay. Obviously, if you wanted, you could just start using in here like some sort of different options like rock or paper or scissors and so on. But this is going to be better for me to actually do it because we can do hand option dot rock, hand option dot paper and so on. So you actually can see what you are using. So for my eye options, I think that's the name. For my eye options, I want to have my hand option enum. So we can only choose one of these options. For the icon itself, we already have some icons in here on the page. Because this is like a JSX element, I'm going to put in here that the type of this is going to be JSX.element. Okay. So our eye options context is going to be of the type eye options array. So let me save this, and this is exactly what we need. Okay, so now that we got everything here, I'm gonna import this here on the top. So let me go there, and I'm gonna do import, and I'm gonna put in here the eye options. So eye options context from. Okay, and I'm just going to put in here the types, eye options context. Just going to put this one here, and there it is. If you hover it now, it's going to say import eye options context. If you hover this now, it's going to say that any options that we have in here will have to be of this eye options array. So if we go back in here, what's the eye options array that we can have? Is going to be this one, a name and an icon. The name can either be a rock, a paper, or scissors, and the icon has to be like a JSX element. Perfect. So we got everything here. Now that we created this create context, the next part will be for us to create a provider. That's how actually a React Context API works. So let's do that. Let's do export function. I'm going to call this one options provider. Okay. And we will have to pass some sort of props. I will add some sort of types for this as well because we will need. Okay. So inside of this, I'm going to create a variable called const context value. Is going to be an object because I'm going to put many different values inside. And what I want to pass in here for the options, okay, my options now will be what I want, okay, so will be something like the hand, rock, paper, scissors, the icons, and so on. So that's exactly what I'm going to create up here on the top. So I'm going to do const options is going to be equals to an array, okay? And let's give this a type because we already created a type for this, if you remember. It's going to be something like this, eye options. So I want to have like a name. I want to have like some sort of an icon, okay? So let's do that. I'm going to pass in here name. The name has to be hand option. Look, we already have these in our types. So I'm going to do in here hand option dot, oops, I'm going to do hand option dot. And now look, TypeScript is giving me auto completion for this. So I can choose paper, rock, or scissors. So I'm going to start with the rock. Okay. After I'm going to do in here icon. And the icon that I want for this now will be, if you guys remember that we use this kind of React icons from before. So I'm going to do in here like FA reg and then was hand rock. Okay. So just like this. And I can pass some properties like, for example, the size of it. I want the size to be 60. This is complaining now because we didn't import this on the top. So let's import that. I'm going to do import this name. Okay. I think just like this from React icons / FA. I think that's the only thing that we need. Okay, let me just make sure that I have this correct. FA reg, I think that's the name, FA reg. Okay, let me just copy this, paste it in here on the top, make sure that is fine. Okay, oh, we forgot to put in here the type. That's why we still have this kind of red line. So this was, if we go back, is this one, I options. Okay, we can have a name and we can have an icon. So let's put this one in here, hi options. Okay, this imported automatically for us in here from this file that we created from before. And obviously, because this is an array, is going to be multiple ones, we have to put in here that this is going to be an array of I options. Okay, so we have our first option. I'm actually just going to copy and paste all of these now. Make sure that I pass a comma in between these values. Okay, because this is an array. Now, I don't want to have rock everywhere, so I want to have rock. I'm going to press dot, and now I'm going to select rock paper. And then for this one, I'm going to have the scissors. And let's change these ones in here as well. So this is going to be instead, this is going to be hand, rock. This is going to be hand, paper. And this one is going to be scissors. Okay. Let's import all of these. Okay, from our React icons on the top. So we got everything for our options. Okay, so we created our context initially with a value of nothing. We know you are just creating the context. But now when you actually create your options provider, this is what you're going to wrap different components to pass these values inside. This is going to be the value that I'm going to pass in, which is the context value. And I'm saying that inside of this context value, I'm going to have a key called options. This name is completely up to you, but I'm going to pass the value to it of these options that I got in here on the top. Okay, so these options is the name that you can give whatever you want. This is the value that we have up here. So in JavaScript, when you have the same name for the key and for the value, you can actually just short this for just one value. Okay, so now that we have our context value, the next thing that we have to do is just do a return. And now I'm going to do options context dot provider. Okay, just close it like this. And then I'm going to pass in here props dot children. So what this means is that now wherever you're going to wrap a component with this options provider, they will have access to any of these values that you have in here. So we got some red lines in here because first of all, it's telling us that we are missing the value that we want to pass to any children that we wrap this. So I'm going to put in here value equals to my context value, which is this one that we just created. Let me just increase the size of this so you guys can see a bit better. Okay, so one last thing that we are missing is probably just the props in here. As you can see, if you hover it, it's saying that props implicitly has any type. We want to make a type for this one. So I'm going to call this one like these props. Obviously, this doesn't exist, this kind of type or interface. So we are going to create these now. So let me go into my types. Let me go down here. I'm going to call this one export interface, and it's going to be props. And this is going to have a type of children, because if you guys remember, we are going to use that props.children, and the type of it is going to be a React node, just like this, because we are going to wrap down our context API with other React nodes, really. So that's what we need to do. We still have some sort of red lines because we need to import this on the top. Okay, and just like that, everything is working fine. Look, no problem at all. So yeah, now that we got this part, the next thing that we just need to do is going to be like wrapping down our choose and play, this part in here. And we don't need to hard code all of these because all these values should come from our context. So that's what we're going to do next. All right, so let's put this context API to work. So if I go on to my choose and play, and I just want to select all these hands that we got here at the moment, and I'm just going to comment them out because look, I'm still not going to save the file. I'm going to see that this part should disappear really. So I'm going to save it. Look, it's all gone because we have hard coded this. So I'm going to go to my main file, which is this main.tsx. I believe that if you created this like with a create React app or whatever, this would be like the index.js or tsx or something like this. So this is like the main root of our project, and this is exactly where I want to pass my context API. So whatever I wrap my context API with, the children of it will have access to the values in there. So let's do that. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do import. And I'm going to do options. So options provider from, and I'm going to go inside of context, and then the file is options context, I believe. Okay. So now that we got these options provider, I want to wrap my app.js, which is like where everything is started, with this, with my options provider. So let me just do that. Actually, just gonna cut this. I'm gonna paste it here, and there it is. Okay. My options provider is wrapping my app.js, and inside of my app.js, this is where I have everything. So meaning that everywhere in our application, we will have available all the values that we got in our context. So let me just open my context. If you remember, at the moment, we only have this. So we should be all fine. Now, I actually want to convert this context API into a hook. So we could just basically extract the values out of this as a hook, really, as a React hook. So let's do exactly that now. I'm going to do down here at the bottom and do export. Okay, so I'm going to export these use options, and I'm going to say const context equals to use context. Look, this use context is one of the React hooks, and it's imported for me on the top automatically. If it didn't for you, you need to add it, all right? The context that I want to use is going to be this one. Look, the one that we created on the top. Okay, and I just want to return the context itself. So wherever I'm going to use this hook called use options, I will be able to return the context. And if you guys remember, the context that we have in here has a value of context. This is the one. It's like an object. And at the moment, we only have the options in there. So whenever we use our use options, we can retrieve this value. And we're going to add more things into it. Okay, so our choose and play, where we had hard-coded all the values that we want, now we will be able to actually go there and just grab the values. So let's do that. Choose and play, and then inside of here, of my component itself, I'm going to call this const options context equals to use options. Okay, just like this. I'm using these use options, but look, obviously, because we didn't import it, let me go back to my context. Look, we export this function, so we need to import it first. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to do import use options. Look, it grabbed automatically the path for me, but if it didn't for you, make sure that you have the right path in there. Okay, so you go one level up to get out of the sections, you go inside of the context, and you grab the options context. So here we have the hook. Now, when I say use options, I can store these in a variable, whatever you want. This is the options context. Now, inside of the options context, let's just go there. Remember that you are returning the value in here. Okay, so you have options to all the all the options that you've got in here, which is these options. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm gonna say that I want to retrieve, for example, the hand for the rock, paper, and scissors, and so on. So I could go in here and look, we had a hand selection from before with a name hard-coded, with a high icon hard-coded, and so on. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna say hand selection. Okay, it's gonna give us an error because it's saying that we are missing properties like the name and the icon. So let's add that. So I'm gonna say the name is gonna be equals to, and now I'm gonna use my options context, and I'm gonna select the dot. Look, if I put the dot, it's giving me, look, this is the only option that you got, which is options. Okay, because this is an array, I'm gonna select the first one. Okay, and then I'm gonna go in here with a name. Okay, dot name, and this obviously is going to be like, because I'm choosing the first one, is going to be the whatever we had in here, which was the rock. Okay, so for the icon, I'm going to pass the value, which is going to be, again, I'm going to copy everything like this, copy it in here. This is going to be now the dot icon, and I don't need to do anything else. Look, it already knows that the icon of it is going to be this one, whatever you have there. Perfect. So let's basically just copy paste what we have here. And now I'm just going to change this to 1 and this is to 2 because, you know, that's the position, that index of the array. So if I refresh the page, okay, let me just make sure that I got everything fine. We got the name, we got the icon. Let's refresh. Ah, there it is. I didn't notice. So we got the rock, paper, and scissors. Obviously, if you would have a lot of different things, like, I don't know, 10 items or whatever, if you notice all of these that you got in here, it's basically the same thing. You are repeating yourself. So if you want to start writing code that is not right, don't repeat yourself, we could go in here and create like some sort of a small loop. So I'm going to say hand options array is going to be equals to, so we got many different options. So I'm just going to go in here into these. Okay, and options, because that's an array, basically, I'm going to do a dot map. And now, because I'm looping through these, I'm going to grab my hand. Okay. And now I just want to return a hand selection. Let me just copy this. Okay, let me just put some parentheses so this looks a bit better. Okay. So obviously these options context dot options 0 is all going to be represented by this parameter that you got on the top. And let me just delete this to make sure that we got the type safety here. So I'm just going to do dot and look, name. Perfect. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to delete everything and just going to put hand dot and look, icon. Okay, so automatically we should have all the code that you got in here repeated into just this one. Okay, so let's copy this variable. Let's delete all of these. Look at how our code is looking so neat now. Let's put some curly braces here because that's the way that you can inject some variables into your JSX. Put this variable there, hand options array, and refresh the page. All the same. Okay, so if I, for some reason, comment this code, this should disappear. If I put it back, it should appear. All right, so we got all of these now set up. the next step would be for us to start adding some interactivity, like selecting the hand, making sure that the computer selects their hand as well. So that's what we're going to do next. All right, so let's carry on. So the next thing that I want to do now is I want to be able to select one of these options and somehow store this information that I selected, for example, the rock, the paper, or the scissors, and store this information in our context, because this is our state management that we can pass this information for other components then. So let's do exactly that now. I'm going to go in here into my options context file. And now I want to start and adding in here a different option, which is going to be when you create your context, you need to give it some sort of initial values. So we have an initial value in here of options that we say that initially is nothing, but obviously once you actually create or use this kind of context, you are going to pass the values of options, and you have the full options here, the full values of it. So I'm going to say that I want to have some sort of a state. Could call it anything. I'm going to call it state because it makes sense. And the value of it is going to be my initial state. Okay, this is just a variable, doesn't exist anywhere, so we are going to create it. I'm going to create this initial state in a separate file just to keep things organized. So in my context, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it initial context values .ts. Okay, let's go inside there now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say export const initial state, and this is equals to. Now, this is going to be all the values that we will probably need to use in our application. So I'm going to put in here player hand. Okay, so the player hand I'm going to put in here as a 0. This will actually represent, for example, the index that you are going to select. So let's say that based on what you have in here, like you got the rock, you got the paper, you got the scissors. So we have the indexes of each one of these options, which is 0, 1, and 2. So I'm going to say that initially I'm going to set this as a rock, an index of 0. I'm going to say that the computer hand initially, when you just started, is going to be 0. Those are just the default values. I'm going to need a run timer. So basically the run timer is going to be like when you actually select one of the options and then you click play. Obviously you're going to see a countdown like 3, 2, 1 until you actually see the results of both. So I'm going to say that the run timer is going to be false because initially you don't want the timer to be running, right? Then I'm going to have a score, and the score is going to be an object where we're going to have the player score. Initially player score is going to be 0, obviously. Computer, the same. Okay. And finally, I'm going to have in here a results. Okay. Where we have the winner, nothing. We'll have a message that says player 1 wins, computer wins, or whatever. Sorry, so this winner is just going to be computer or player or whatever, who is the winner. And then you got a message like player 1 wins, rock beats scissors, or something like that. Okay, let's put this initially as an empty string. Okay, so we created this, but we're using TypeScript, remember, so we need to add some sort of types for this. So here on the top, I'm going to say that this is going to be of the type I. So usually people put like an I before because it's like an interface, just to say it's an interface I, initial state. Obviously this type here, this interface does not exist. So we will create it in this other file that we have called the options context types. Let me just save this and we will import this or create this from here. So let's create that. So I'm just going to add it down here at the bottom. Export interface I initial state, right? And if you guys remember, we had a player hand, which was just a number. We had a computer hand, which was also just a number. Then we had a run timer, which was a boolean, is either true or false. Then we had a score. Okay, so if you remember the score, what we had in there was like the computer score or the player score. So I'm going to create here another interface called interface I score, and this will have the player, which is a number, and we'll have the computer, which is also a number. Look, I'm not going to use any sort of export in this interface because I'm not going to use it anywhere else. I'm just going to use here inside. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the results. So if you remember, on the results we had the winner and a message. So I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to go and create an interface called I results, and I'm going to add the winner, which is a string, and I'm going to add a message, which is also a string. So let me copy this, paste it down here, and now we got this I initial state, which we can now import to our initial context values. Let's do that. Import. Let's see if I just hover here and click and import. Look, it did the import automatically for us. Basically, when you have that, just hover with your mouse and then it will give you an option like to automatically import it, if you are using Visual Studio Code, of course. There's some sort of problem in here. Run timer, it's saying that there is some problem with this. Maybe I did something wrong in my initial state interface. Let's look in there. Ah, look, there it is. You see, run timer is with a lower t, lower case t, so that's what was happening. So if I go back here, now everything is fine. Okay, perfect. So let's go back to our options context. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say state, initial state. It's going to give you an error because we didn't import it. So let's do exactly what I just mentioned from before. Let's hover with the mouse. Let's click quick fix. It's going to give you the option to import. Okay, so import initial state from the initial context values. Okay, perfect. So if you do it like that, let me just see. Now it's also giving you an error because when we created our context, we specified that our I options context only had the options. We never specified that it was going to have a state. That's why we are going to have this problem. So I'm just going to do Control and click into these I options. This way I can just go directly into that file where we have this. So Control, click. If it doesn't work, just go manually. Okay, I options context. And now, obviously I need to add that in here. So let's go in here, options, and I'm going to say state. And the shape of this state is going to be, okay, we just created that initial state, okay, from down here. You don't even need to import anything because look, it's just here. Perfect. Let's go to our I options context. Everything is working fine. Awesome. All right. So now that we created all these different options that we need, all these different types, let's go into the actual provider and start adding some values. So that's exactly what we're going to do next. All right, guys, let's carry on with this. So if we hover the value here on your provider, it's going to give you an error saying that we are actually missing the state type in our context value, because if you remember, when we created initially our create context, we said that it would have some options and a state, and we even specified this initial state, but we never passed here the value that you are going to be using all the time. So let's create that. First of all, we need to specify the key of state, and then we need to give it some sort of value. I'm going to be using some use reducer, a hook from React, that will allow us to basically manage all the different options that we'll be able to select. Like, for example, if we are going to click on a button to select your option, we are going to dispatch an action, and this action is going to update our overall state, because our overall state is going to look like, let's go here, something like this. We'll have player hand, computer hand, and so on. Yeah, something like this. So let's go to our options context and let's create this state. I'm going to go in here, const state, and then to update it, I'm going to call this one dispatch. And now I'm going to use this use reducer from React. Okay, so I think it should update here on the top automatically for me. I think that's it. Use reducer. Yeah. Now I just need to go down here. This use reducer takes two parameters. So one is going to be like your state. I'm going to call this one, let me just see, I call this score reducer. Obviously, look, we haven't created it yet. We will create in a second. And then we have like in here our initial state. Okay, so initial state, which we already had from before. So this is the two parameters that we need to pass inside of our use reducer. Okay, so we will make available this state here. All right. And we also need another thing, which is like, we want to be able to pass this state everywhere in our project, but we also need to be passing like some sort of way to update it. Okay, so I'm going to call this one like dispatch, and the value for it is going to be this dispatch from this state that we got here. As usual, if you got the key and the value that they are the same, we can just reduce this to just one value. Okay, just like this. This is going to give us some sort of an error, I'm sure, somewhere, because look, for example, we are using on the values of our provider, options, state, and dispatch, but when we create our context, we never specified this kind of dispatch, so we need to add it here. So I'm going to go in here and say a dispatch, which initially is just going to be like a regular function like this. We have to update this in our options context, which I'm going to do in a second, because first I just want to build in here our state of the score reducer. I'm going to create a new folder just specifically for that, so we keep things organized. I'm going to create a new folder called reducers. Okay, and inside of this folder, I'm going to create a file and call this one, for example, score reducer.tsx. Okay, let's do exactly that. And I'm going to start export default. This is going to be the only thing that I want to export, so I'm going to use the default one. Function, I'm going to call this one score reducer. This takes two parameters. One is going to be the state. The type of this state is going to be of the initial state, which we created before. Okay, so it imported automatically for me. And then we will have an action. So an action is going to be basically like when you click a button, you want something, come here into this state and just update. Okay, this is going to be of the type. This type does not exist. We are going to create it in a second, but I'm going to call it action types. Okay, like this is fine. So from this action that we have here, I'm going to say const something 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 equals to action. You could do action.type and then action.payload, because usually this action is going to be like an object. I'm going to destructure the values from this action like type and payload. So I don't have to do everywhere in here in my code like action.type or do action.payload and so on, right? So this is going to be like this, const type, payload, and so on. And now we will have our switch case. So that's how you actually create a reducer, meaning that you're going to pass multiple actions and different actions will update your state accordingly. So we will pass the type of action that we are going to do. And I'm going to do in here a case of update player choice. Okay, so if we pass a type of this update player choice, I want to update my state according to that. So I'm going to do return. So I'm going to do in here dot state means that I want to bring whatever was there in the state. Okay, so I don't want to touch anything else. And I just want to go in there and say that my player hand is going to be equals to whatever was the payload that I sent into this action. Okay, so in the action I can say this is going to be the action. If we get to this case, we manage the state to be the same thing like it was from before and just update the player hand to be whatever is the index that you click in there. Okay, and I want to have like some sort of a default case. If for some reason something happens that you are not really aware of what kind of action we passed. So I'm going to say return the original state. And then I'm going to say on the results, the winner is just going to be like an error. And the message is just going to be, we have an error. We have an error. Okay, we will update this as we go. Okay, so we don't have these action types, so we're going to create that. Let's go into our reducer. Let's go in here. I'm going to call this one score reducer types.tsx, and let's go inside there. And because we're going to have multiple different actions, I'm going to create this into an enum. Okay, so export enum option action kind. I think that's a good name for it. And inside, I'm going to have a variable called update player choice. Just going to put an underscore here so we can read this better. And this is going to be equals to this. Okay, we are just using these enums because it's much better for us to have some sort of a variable where you could update everywhere wherever you are using this. This is action kind. Okay, perfect. And now we are going to have an interface of update player choice, and this is going to have a type of my option kind dot update player choice. That's the only option that we got here. And then we will have a payload. If you remember, I said that we're going to send a payload, which is going to be a number representing the index of whatever option you choose. We have an error, that's why we can't see anything at the moment. So this is completely fine. Finally, I just want to export a type, and this is going to be of my action types. Right now, I'm just going to export this one. Okay. Later on, we're going to have this like as a union type where we can pipe in here like different values like or update player choice or update computer choice. We're going to have many choices. For now, we just have this one. So we export this one from the type. Let's go into our reducer. The type for this action is going to be of action types. If I hover this, click in here on quick fix and import. So this imports automatically for us. If it doesn't do this for you, just do it manually. Looks great. So let's go into our context and look at what's in here. At the moment, we have the score reducer saying cannot find the score reducer. Let's hover this, quick fix, import it at the top. That's exactly what I did. And now it says that this dispatch function does not exist in this create context initial interface. So I'm going to press Control click and go inside of this file, which is our options context types. Let's go in here, and now I'm going to pass the dispatch. That's what we have the name. Dispatch. And the type of this is going to be of React dot dispatch. And the type of it is only going to be of action types. Okay, so we don't want to use this function with other things that should not be doing. Okay, so we only want the action types. Okay, so I imported it on the top automatically, and this should be all working. All right, so now that we implemented all of this, let me just go into our options context. I think we got everything ready now to start going here and just, for example, select one of these options and click play, and just make sure that whenever you do it, all of this state that we just configured is all working fine. All right, so that's what we're going to do next. All right, so let's see if everything is working fine. So I'm going to go in here into my browser, and I'm just going to open the developer tools. And here we are going to see if we have access to the state that we just created in the section of the rock, paper, scissors, which is this components, no, sections, choose and play. All right, so if we go into our choose and play, there we should be able to grab the state because we already have the options in here. Use options, the hook. Let's actually delete this stuff here on the top. Okay, we don't need that anymore. We have that one. I want to do a console.log of the options context dot, and if I do dot, look, we have access to the dispatch, which is the function that updates the state, the options, and the actual state. Okay, initially we should have that initial state. Okay, so I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna refresh, and there it is. Look, we have the computer hand, player hand, the results, it's here. Okay, so let me just do one zoom, maybe you guys can see better. We got access to it, which is great. Perfect. So let me just delete this. Now I know that we have access to it. We can start doing some stuff. Every time that we are doing this loop here, I want to pass an extra parameter to this hand selection, which is going to be like, what's the index of this component? Because we know that the first component represents the rock, the other one paper, and the other one scissors. And we want to grab the index of each one of them to update, our state. So I'm going to add in here an extra parameter, which is going to be, let me see, I'm going to call it hand choice index. And I can't just put in here like 0, because otherwise all of them, they would be like 0 and so on. So when you do a dot map loop, the second parameter here is actually the index of the loop that you are doing. First time you run is 0, second time 1, and so on. So I'm going to pass this I here, call it whatever you want. Obviously now we got here like an error saying that our hand selection component doesn't have this kind of property. Okay, so I'm going to control click the hand selection component so I can go in there. Let me just double click here. I go inside of this hand selection component. And if you remember, we created before that this will take some React functional component props. Okay, and the shape of those props would be just a name and an icon. But now we have something else, which is the hand choice index. So let's copy this. Let's go there. Okay, so I'm on my hand selection component on my interface. I'm going to pass in here that we will receive another prop called hand choice index, and the type of it is going to be a number. Okay, and we need to grab it or destructure it from our props, because that's exactly what we did here. Okay, and choice index. Perfect. Okay, so now that we got these, let's actually start making some sort of calls to our state, make sure that this is working fine. So in my button that I got down here, I want to pass a onClick event. So meaning that whenever we click here, okay, I want to run a function. So whenever you want to run a function and pass some sort of parameter into that function, you know, just use it like this. And I'm going to call this one select option. Okay, and whenever we call this, I want to pass the hand choice index. Okay, perfect. This function, select option, does not exist anywhere. So let's do exactly that. Okay, I'm going to go in here and create const select, oops, this is the name, select option. Okay, is going to be equals to an arrow function, and this select option takes the index of whatever is the button that you are clicking on, and this needs like some sort of a type. It's a number, right? So now that we got this number, let's just do a console.log. Console.log the index of this button is, okay, and I'm just going to put in here with a plus, and now I'm going to put the index, right? So whenever I click one of these buttons, we should see this console.log with the correct index. Let's try it out. Let me just refresh just in case. I'm going to click the rock. Okay, the button index is 0. I'm going to click this one, index is 1, and then I got this one, index is 2. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so we got these. Now, what I really want to do is like whenever I click one of these buttons, let's just comment this out or remove. I don't need it. I want to update my state. So I'm going to put in here a dispatch. So dispatch, where I'm going to dispatch, oops. So dispatch, where I'm going to dispatch an object with the type of options, option action kind. Okay, so this is the type that we created from before, imported automatically for me. And if I put a dot, okay, only gives me this option, which is the update player choice, right? And then the payload, which is going to be the value that you want to send to your state, is going to be this handle choice index. That's what we, no, sorry, this one, the index that you are passing here. So this should be all fine. Now the problem in here is that where is this dispatch coming from? We don't have it anywhere in our code. So we need to bring it back as we have done from before. So we're going to do const options context. Remember that this is working because we wrapped everything with our provider. Use options, okay? And this use options obviously is going to give you an error because you need to import it. Let's go in here, quick fix, import it. There it is on the top. Now we need to grab the dispatch from the options context. Let's do that. I'm going to do const dispatch equals to options context. Okay, so it's better for me to do this rather than having to do everywhere in here in my code like options context dot dispatch. So it looks a bit cleaner. And I think that's everything. That's everything that we need to do. I just want to make sure that I also put a console.log down here to make sure that this is updating correctly, right? Console.log of the options context. I'm actually going to take the state if I can. I'm going to do a console.log of the state from everywhere. Okay, let's refresh the page. We got down here that the computer hand is 0, player hand is 0. Now, if I click the scissors, because we send this dispatch function with this option kind of update player choice and this payload of 2, we should update our state. Okay, so we should go into the reducer. So the reducer takes that action, which has the type and the payload. If the type matches this, which that's our case that we have here on the end selection, look, option kind, update player choice, and we pass that value. Let's go back to the reducer. We should have the state as it was and only update the player hand. Okay, let's see if it works. So let's look down here. Let me just clear this just so we can see better. I'm going to click this one, look down here, and there it is. Look, player hand 2. So looks like that everything is well connected. So perfect. Now that we have this, I just want to do like a small little thing, which is like whenever we click one of these buttons, I want to make sure that this is like selected, like we can see that, oh, we select this option. So let's do that next. Alright guys, so let's see if we can actually have an active class that will show us which kind of option we selected. So for that, whenever we are in here in our hand selection component and we click a button, at the moment we are just dispatching a function, but I want to make sure that I create some sort of a local state here to make sure that we press the button. So I'm going to say const hand pressed and set hand pressed. This is going to be our state that will keep track if we are clicking one of those buttons or not. And this is going to be equals to a use state. Okay, let me just import that on the top, which I just did. And the initial value is going to be false. Because we are using TypeScript, we can pass here between angle brackets what's going to be the type of it, which is going to be a boolean. So this is exactly what we want. And now, whenever we click the select option, I also going to put in here set hand pressed. So we are updating this local state to be true. So we know that we pressed the button. Cool. So now in our button, I'm going to put inside of this class name, I'm going to put some logic. Okay. I'm going to put, we already have this kind of choices button. I'm going to put some backticks, some $, because we want this to be here like this, hand pressed. So we know that our state is true. So if we click somewhere and okay, our hand choice index, okay, that's what we have here, is going to be equals to, okay, is going to be equals to the index from our state. Okay, so this is the index for each one of the buttons, which is going to be 0 for the first, 1, and 2, and so on. But I want to make sure that this is equals to the index that we have in our overall state from our options context. So let's bring that. So I'm going to go in here. We already got the options context, and I'm going to call this one const selected hand index is going to be equals to my state, which we just got in here on the top. And if I do dot, I want to grab the player hand. Okay, so if the hand choice index is going to be equals to the selected hand index, make sure everything is fine. Okay, if it is, I want to have a styles dot what I'm going to call this active choice. So active choice, else is just going to be like this, okay, like an empty string. And I think this is going to work fine. So obviously this doesn't exist, this active choice. So let's go to our hand selection module. Okay, active choice, and I'm going to put a background color of orange, for example. So I expect when we load the page for the first time, because my hand choice index, for example, for the first button, which is rock, definitely is going to be to the select hand index, because we said that our initial state, the player hand, is also going to be 0. So I expect this one in here to be 0. Let me just refresh the page. Actually, is not working. So let's just double check what's in here. We got button, but the class is not being applied, if you can see. So we definitely have, because look, it says hand pressed. So we need to click on it. If we don't click it, it's not going to work. So let me click. There it is. Now it's working. If I click this one, okay, now this is the one that we are selected. Okay, so it's all working fine. Perfect. All right, so let's just carry on. All right, guys, so now because we have already a couple of things working, so we got our global state working with context, we can actually click in one of these buttons and send some actions. I think it's time for us to start implementing some tests and make sure that everything is working fine. Because we are using Vite to create our project, we can't actually use Jest, but we can use the library, a testing library from Vite, which is vitest, which is very similar to Jest. We use almost the same things in there, even the names and everything. So let's get started with this kind of setup. So I'm going to go into my terminal. There's going to be a couple of things that I want to install. So I'm going to do npm I minus capital D. This is going to be to install these things as dev dependencies, meaning that you don't need them to run this project in production mode. So let's do that. One of the things that I want to install, so I'm just going to paste them here one by one. You can install them one by one or all at once as you want. Testing library, JSDOM. We need the testing library from React. We are also going to use that. I'm going to use the testing library user event for, triggering things like clicking buttons and so on. The next thing that we want, we already got the types from React DOM, that's all fine. I'm going to use the vitest plugin React, we already got that. I need the vitest coverage because we're going to use some coverage to make sure that we are testing all the files and all the different lines that we want. I'm going to put in here JS DOM. This is going to be needed by vitest to access the DOM. And finally, I think we just need vitest. And that's it. So I'm going to press enter to install all of these things. And they should come here now into the dev dependencies. That's the only thing that we need. So this should take just like a few seconds or a minute. And once it's done, we can just carry on. All right, so looks like everything is installed. We got JSDOM, vitest, everything. Testing library. The next thing that we need to do is we need to create a setup file. So basically this setup file needs to be inside of the source. So let me just close down everything. Okay. And I'm going to go in here, new file. So I'm going to put this inside of the source. Okay. Make sure that it's there. So this file is going to be called setup tests.ts. I think that's the name, setup tests.ts. And here, I'm just going to copy what I have here. So we're going to import all the matchers from the testing library jest.matchers, and we're going to import expect and v from vitest, and just basically like extend those matchers from jest. So this is just so we can use all these different assertions like we could do in jest with vitest. Like I said, it's going to be very, very similar. So once we got that, I think that the next step that we just need to do is go inside of our vitconfig.ts. We need to have these references on the top, like this. So reference types vitest, reference types vit client. Make sure that you copy these exactly with these 3 slashes, like it looks like comments, but it's not. You really need to have these kind of references, otherwise you will start seeing some errors in your code, saying that it can't know what is vit or whatever. So make sure that you got this exactly as it is here at the top. And then in our vit config, I'm going to pass in here a new key, which is called test. And now we're going to set globals to be true. Okay, so we can use these globally. Then we're going to have our environment where our tests are going to run, which is going to be in the JS DOM. Okay, this is the package that we just installed. Finally, we need to have in here the setup files, which is going to be this file that we just created. So I'm going to put in here an array because you could put multiple ones. So the path there is going to be this current directory, going inside of the source and grab the setup tests.ts. Okay, so make sure that this path is correct and make sure that your setup test is inside of the source. So I think this is all good. Finally, this is optional, but if you want to put it like a test timeout, 8,000 milliseconds, it doesn't really matter. It's like sometimes your tests are running a bit too much, because we're going to use those timers after. If functions are running for a bit, might crash your tests, so you give it a bit more time. I think the default is like 5 seconds for the test to be running, and then if it passes that, it's just going to crash everything, so I give it a bit more breathing room. Probably is not necessary, but I'm just going to leave it for now. And I think that's it. I think that we got everything now set up to actually start testing. So we got a couple of things to test now, which is going to be when we click one of these options, we want to make sure that we update the global state with it. And we could also test our reducer that we created from before, right? Because we want to make sure that if we pass some values in here, this is also working. So we're going to test this first. And maybe let's test the reducer first, and then we can test this one to make sure everything is working fine. All right, so that's what we're going to do next. All right, so let's start testing our score reducer. For that, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it score. So score reducer test.tsx, and let's start writing down our tests. There's going to be a couple of things that we're going to need. First, we're going to need a describe block. So I'm just going to use this describe block. Okay, so you need to import this describe from vitest. So the describe block is just going to be for us to know exactly what's going to be the section that we are testing. So I'm just going to put in here that we are testing the score reducer, just to put the name, so whenever our tests fail or pass, we know that it's related to our score reducer. And inside of this describe block, we're going to have a callback function. And inside of this callback function, that's where we're going to have all the tests for our reducer. So in order for us to start creating some sort of a test, we start with an it. Okay, this it in here, you're going to import it from vitest as well. This is super similar to what you can do in jest, so it's basically the same thing. So inside of this it, we're going to pass like what's going to be the description of the test. So For now, I just want to test, for example, that we are updating the reducer with the correct player hand. So I'm going to say it should. So this is how you should read it. It should update the reducer. So the score reducer, let's name this correctly. The score reducer with the correct player hand. Okay, so player hand. So that's it. Let's put another callback function. Okay, so now inside of this callback function, this is where we're going to have our test. Like I said, we're going to have multiple tests. They will all be inside of this describe block. For now, we're just going to test this one. And to start the test, there's going to be one thing that we need to import, which is going to be like our render function and our screen function as well. So I'm going to put in here render. So this render actually imported automatically in here on the top from React DOM. This is not the one that we want. We want to have the render from the library that we installed before, which is the testing library React. Okay. Now in here is going to be whatever component you want to render and test it. For this kind of scenario, I'm just going to create like some sort of a component. Any component would be fine. So I'm going to create one component here that we will use to use reducer inside and just test it, make sure that it's working. So I'm going to call this one testing component. Okay. This component does not exist anywhere. We are going to create it right now. And make sure that everything is working, of course. So we're going to render this component, and then I'm going to have to make an assertion to whatever I want to test. So what I want to test is I'm going to put in here my expectation. So I'm going to put expect. Okay, this needs to be imported from here, from vitest. Okay, so we got our expectation, we got our describe, it, expect. So I expect, and now we can have our screen. So screen is going to be the way that we can actually go inside of a component that you are trying to render and test, and just grab some things out of it, like by text, by elements, and so on. So I'm going to do screen dot get by text. Okay, so I'm going to do screen dot get by text, and the text that I want to look inside is going to be something like this. Player hand. So I'm going to put this as a regex because it's just easier for us. So player hand, and I'm going to put a colon and maybe like 2. Let's say this is going to be the index of whatever button you clicked in here. So player hand 2, and after I'm just going to put in here dot to be in the document. Okay, so this is what we're going to test, and this is either going to pass or fail. Now let's create this testing component. I'm going to create it here on the top just before our describe block, and I'm going to start something like this. Const, let's go in here, const, and I'm going to do testing component. This is what I'm going to call it. Is going to be equals to a function, and inside I'm going to return some things. So I'm going to return what? Let's just put some JSX, anything in here. Let's say, for example, I want to have a paragraph saying player hand and a value. Let's say, for example, player hand 1. So you are rendering your testing component, which is this one. And after, we are going to try to run this expectation, saying, okay, let's go with this function screen.get by text something, and try to find inside of this component the player player hand 2 to be in the document. Obviously, this player hand 2 does not exist, so the test will fail. So let's just test this out. In order for us to run the test, I'm going to go in here inside of my package.json. I'm going to go and create a new script. So where you have your scripts, I'm going to create one script called test. Call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it test. And to run it, we're going to use vitest. We just installed it before. So let's do exactly that. Okay, let's make sure that everything is fine. Screen. Okay, so maybe, oh, I put this in the wrong place. So screen actually comes from the testing library React, not from vitest. So that's just a mistake. Okay, let's run the tests. To run the tests, I'm going to do npm run test. Okay, so we're going to run the tests now. And look at this, automatically failed. So as you can see, the test, we have one test file. That's the one. We only have one test inside, which is this it block that we got here. Okay, and let's go up, and it says in here that screen.getByText, there is an arrow pointing here that this is our problem. Okay, and then look, you got an example of whatever is the kind of component that you are trying to test, which is this one. So we got in there a body, div, paragraph, player one hand, and then if you read the error, it says testing library element error, unable to find an element with a text of player hand 2. Okay, so if now I change my expectation here from player hand 2 to player hand 1, now if I save this, look, all my tests are passing because this is actually working, right? Now, obviously, we are trying to test here our score reducer. That's the whole point. We are not just testing something static like what we have here. So let's add our score reducer to this component and make sure that it's working. So I'm going to go in here and do const state. Okay, and we got a dispatch. And this is going to be equals to a use reducer. Let's import this from React. Okay, so automatically imported. And the reducer that we want to test is the score reducer. Okay, it was imported automatically for me as well. And then we have an initial state, which is the initial state that we also have from the context. We got the value in there. All right. But I want to make sure that I'm not using these exact values from here. I want to make sure that I can use different values. And for that, we are going to use something like mocking. Okay, so on the top, I'm going to do v.mock. And what I want to do in here is like, we are importing these values, these initial values into our test. So we are going to mock the import from that place. So this path that we got in here for our initial state, I'm going to say v.mock. Okay, so let's put this exact path. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it in here. And now I'm going to say, okay, whenever we are going to use some values from this initial state, which in this case would be here, I want to replace these with some other values. Could be whatever I want. Okay, this is just to make things a bit different. So I'm going to put return. I want to have the initial state block. And now let me just copy all these values that I got in here. And I'm going to paste them here. Okay. So I want to have some different values. Let's say that initially I want to have on the page, let's say player hand 2. So this is the initial value that we got in there because we are mocking whatever we import from these values. Whenever we use in here in our reducer this initial state, the initial state is not going to be what's in this file, but is actually going to be whatever is in this mock. Okay, so if we do it like that, now in order for us to go into this testing component, instead of hard coding this value of 1, I'm going to put in here this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do state. That's how we access the values in there. State dot, look, this is all the options that we want, and I want to access the player hand. Okay, it's going to be this one. Okay, so we got the state, we got the player hand. So if I save this now, this test will no longer pass because we are looking for player hand 1, and obviously this is going to be in here player hand 2 because the value is coming from our initial state. I'm going to save it. Let's see the test fail. Obviously is failing. If I put in here now 2, okay, now it's going to pass. Right, so this is actually passing for just like this initial value, but we want to test the reducer. So if you remember, inside of our reducer, we're going to have multiple cases whenever we want to dispatch some actions with some sort of a name, like this one, update player choice, and with some payload, like it's going to change the index of your player hand. So this is exactly what we want to do in here. When we test this testing component, I'm going to pass it a property. Let's say, for example, I'm going to call this property called action. Okay, just so you guys don't get confused, I'm going to call it like my action. Could be anything really. Okay, and this property that I'm going to pass in here is going to be an object, and the object now will have a type, just like a normal action. Yeah, so it's going to have a type of option action kind dot update player choice. That's what we figured out before. And now we're also going to have a payload, which is going to be, for example, 0, let's say. Okay, so it's giving us an error here because it's saying that, okay, our testing component, we never specified that if we have some sort of props or not. So let's go in here. Let's say that we will receive some props, and these props will have a type of iProps. Okay, let's create this. I'm going to say interface of iProps, and we are going to receive a property called myAction, okay, which will be of the kind of action types, because we just created those action types from before. Action types will have accept this kind of type, a type with this and a payload with a number. Okay, perfect. We got everything that we want. Now, I want this component here to be able to, based on this property that we have, maybe when the component loads, okay, so we're going to use a use effect. Okay, let's see if it imported on the top or not, the use effect. There it is, imported. If it didn't for you, make sure that you import it so you don't have an error. Okay, so I want to have a use effect, and this use effect, what it's going to do is like, I'm going to put in here an empty dependency array, meaning that this function will run once when this component is fully loaded. What I want to do is like, I want to use the dispatch function that we got here from our reducer. And what I want to dispatch is going to be our props.myAction. Remember, that's this property that we have in here. So what are we dispatching inside of this function? We are dispatching this object with a type of option kind update player and with a payload of 0. All right. So if this happens, we go inside of our score reducer. Are we having any sort of type of action with this update player choice? Let's see. We are. And what's going to be the payload that we're going to change? Okay, let's go to our score reducer. We're going to update the player hand with 0. All right, so if this happens, when the component, testing component, is fully loaded, we should expect to see on the page not the value 2 that we had from our initial state, okay? But now we're going to have the payload of 0. So let's put in here payload of 0. And if you refresh, everything is working. We expect this to be in the document, and it works. Just to make sure that this is correct, let's say that I try to look for a player hand of 1, which we know is wrong. We expect to see the 0 in there. Let's see this test failing now. Let's save this. Let's go in here. If failed, it's saying that this is the part of our test that failed. Okay. And then if you go on to the top, look, this is a preview of how your component looks like. It says that it has this one, player hand 0. And then finally it says unable to find an element with the text of player hand 1. Okay, so let's put this back to 0, and our test is just passing as it was expected. All right, so the next thing that we want to test now is going to be probably this one, that we want to make sure that we can click in one of these buttons, make sure it has the correct class and so on. So that's what we're going to do next.